into nitrate, and then the denitrification process converts it from nitrate to nitrogen gas. Once it's nitrogen gas, it goes from the wastewater into the atmosphere, and it's no longer a contaminant. The inner ring of the combined treatment units is our clarifier. So it the wastewater moves around in the bioreactor cell in a counterclockwise direction, and then flows up through the secondary clarifier. And that's where the velocity slows down and allows all of the solids to settle to the bottom. We have our nice clean water that goes over a trough into the collection weir and heads off to pond 3. So this is a section of the combined treatment unit. So we've got the base mat of the rebar for the concrete tank. So to give you a sense of scale, the concrete tanks are 30 meters in diameter, about 100 feet, so they're fairly large. The inside of the tank is shown on the right here. We've got part of the clarifier mechanism installed, and you can see the scrapers at the bottom. They rotate slowly to collect that sludge. All right, so that's all we had for an high-level overview of the treatment processes. So we'll turn it over to.
And just before I do, does anybody have any questions about what the treatment process is doing or how it was designed?
Yes.
Go ahead, Councillor Sarson.
Through the chair, so there's only going to be one pond? Is that correct?
We're keeping all of the ponds. We're just going to utilize pond 3 for the treated effluent.
Councillor Chenard.
My only question is where you mentioned on there is the rules changed. Did the rules change from the start of this project till now?
No, sorry, I guess province-wide. So the Alberta Environment has changed the regulations province-wide. And part of your town of Edson operating approval was mandated by Alberta Environment that these were your new effluent requirements.
Okay, so that's where province-wise, like this project we were ongoing, had to do it for many years. So from the day that we decided on a total price, the province changed the rules?
No.
And okay, so these rules were in place right from the original part of the project?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, that grit that you talk about,
Yes.
Is there any use for it at all besides just landfill?
So the grit, it's a combination of sand and inert material that doesn't respond to the biological treatment process that we have. So it's mostly sand and it's mostly sand. So it really has mostly sand. It really has no commercial value. So.
Okay. And one other question, you talked about screening. How large is what's the grid?
6 millimeters is the spacing on our screen.
Oh.
So what we're trying to do is to get rid of plastics, hair, rags, those kinds of things. Largely the kinds of things that shouldn't be disposed of in the sewage system to start with. But what we're trying to do is to, has two benefits. One is it reduces the risk of plugging in our mechanical equipment downstream, and longer term it improves improves the qualities of the biosolids that are ultimately generated by the treatment process, which eventually will need to be disposed of, and that's land application. But the less plastics and inorganics, the more useful the biosolids are.
Right. So whatever you collect has to go to the landfill?
Typically not. The screenings?
The screening, what you collect in the
They
screening.
go to landfill
right.
as well.
Okay, thank you.
On your screen material net, how do you get rid of it? How will you suck it up with a vac truck or something, or how do you dispose
No,
of
the
it?
mechanical screens have two components. They have it's a front clean screen, so it collects them in the front, drops them into an auger and compactor to try to get rid of as much moisture as possible. That's discharged into a trailer, and then the trailer is hauled to landfill.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, please continue.
Okay, so with with our construction schedule, our current schedule, factoring in all of our adventures during construction, is to complete our commissioning on the middle of November 15th. So, which is approximately 7.5 months behind our original schedule. the most serious problems that we had during construction. We still have, and we're working through 3 additional issues. The first one is the construction of our 6-inch water line that services the water treatment plant, and the modifications that were made to our gravity sewer connection, the connection to the existing, how we connect our sewage treatment plant to the existing sewer, in order to minimize the impact on the embankment for Alberta transportation. We made some modifications to the design to make it more constructible and to reduce the impact on the embankment. And the way that we did that requires that we advance the schedule for decommissioning the anaerobic cell, which required a letter of authorization from Alberta Environment and confirming that there was no contamination before that cell was decommissioned. We've completed the work associated with the environmental investigation to confirm that there was no contamination below the liner. Alberta Environment has accepted that, and now we're just waiting on the signed letter from Alberta Environment. So once we have that letter, then that component of the work can proceed. The waterline construction itself, we were in combination with the details on the sewer tie-in. We were also required to modify the water main construction to minimize the risk of slope failure in that location. That was completed last fall.
November 2017.
And we have the permit for construction to take place there. So that's issue number 1. You gonna give me questions after I do all 3, or?
Councillor Wilson.
I have a question on that first
Yeah.
one. How long have you been waiting for that signed letter?
Which signed letter? Oh, from Alberta
Number 1,
Environment?
from the environment minister.
So we
About a
submit-
week.
About a week and a half. So we submitted our environmental assessment report on May 11th. Alberta Environment's reviewed it. They told us, I guess, informally they had no further questions, but they need to officially issue that letter before we can go ahead. So.
Okay, so you don't need the town to write a letter or anything?
No.
Okay, just-
So far,
okay.
they've been very responsive.
Oh, good, good.
What we really needed to do was to complete our environmental condition monitoring. So we need to get inside the lagoon, do the sampling, get the results of the sampling. And that one, no, that was a good news story. We
Good.
had, although we had evidence of hydrocarbon staining inside the lagoon, based on the investigation that was done, that didn't extend below the liner, which was fortunate, because we had some concerns based on what we saw inside the liner, but inside the pond, but.
Good. Good to have good news.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chenard.
So on this project, you're around 6 months behind, is that correct?
7.5, if I'm.
Now, what would be your main reasons for behind? I mean, a lot of times factoring in rain, snow, was there any main thing that slowed you up?
There were 3 significant cost issues that we were trying to resolve. So one was the construction inside the what turned out to be the Alberta transportation right-of-way. So that initially we were working on the mistaken assumption that was town right-of-way, but it was in fact the Alberta transportation right-of-way. So that required negotiation and redesign with Alberta Transportation on both our sewer tie and our water main construction. The other 2 issues were the imported fill. We had a shortage of material, suitable clay material. Our original cut fill bounds didn't adequately cover the degree of suitable material that we would encounter. And we had to work with that town's engineering to find suitable locations of clay material inside the site to try to mitigate the additional costs. And the third one was the issues related to the interconnecting piping between the operations building and the two CTUs. So that's, we ended up going through several iterations on redesigning that piping to try to eliminate or minimize those costs. In the end, we were unable to reduce the costs, but it had moved to a point where we missed a construction window. So we had to wait for the ground to thaw before they could proceed with some of the work. That's the long-winded explanation.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead.
Okay, second one, the underground contractor. This came to light shortly after we resolved all our underground pricing issues, and that was the Alliance is the underground contractor that Alpha was using for all of their tie-ins, sewer, water, interconnecting piping. Alpha advised us that Alliance had gone into receivership, which, well, caused another problem. But we explained our desire to maintain the schedule that was agreed to with change order costs that were approved, and our need to stay on schedule. Alpha Construction ended up negotiating with 3 contractors to complete the work within the time frame and within the agreed to price. They're using one specialized contractor for the interconnecting piping and the directional drill piping for the water main. So that's New Edge Construction. They're using a local contractor, Edson?
Okay, so,
Yes.
To do the open cut water, sanitary, and the sewer tie-in. There's also a third smaller contractor, Lambo, that they're using for the electrical trenching. But in the end, the contractor was able to maintain their original price and the schedule. So the only thing we're waiting on the water line is to get one more reading off our trying to make it really quiet for you. One more reading on the slope inclinometers before we start work on the directional drilling, just so that we can get a good baseline for the existing conditions before we start construction, so that there's clarity between us and Alberta Transportation if there's ever any future issues with the embankment. The last one isn't very descriptive, but as part of the work, our original plan was to have TELUS install their communications on Fortis's overhead poles from the property line to the last pole where we make the transition from overhead to underground. The one difficulty that we encountered was Fortis has, the town and AECOM had been in conversation with Fortis about making modifications to go convert the poles at the
Greywater truck bills.
water reclamation and where the proposed location for the new truck fill is at the southwest corner of the site. And because that would mean that Fortis would need to decommission those poles, which would then have TELUS's communications cables on it. Fortis was unwilling to allow TELUS to install their cables on those poles. So I've been working with engineering and Fortis, and what we're proposing to do is to have Fortis make the modifications from the property line to the last pole that needs to be relocated at the truck fills, and have TELUS's cable installed at the same time. So we're working to resolve that one, but it means some additional costs to achieve that. However, Fortis and TELUS are now on the same page and prepared to do what we originally planned with that modification. Hopefully that made sense.
And everything that we talked about is in the quarterly report that you have a printed copy of, along with the updated schedule.
Any questions? Councilor Wilkinson?
Sorry, I guess I wanna know what is the cost then, this negotiation, say, between TELUS and Fortis, what extra cost?
We're still waiting on the pricing, but it's between $25,000 to $30,000. That's Fortis's cost. The TELUS's, that's to replace the poles with underground and to make modifications to the terminal pole, which now has to support the loads, which it didn't before. Plus, they have to ensure that the work is done without impacting the pole, which is kind of important. The cost on TELUS's side are relatively small, but we haven't confirmed what those will be.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Curry?
Just through the chair. So just in your quarterly report here, where you see the changes in the approved changes, the increase, does that include all of those costs?
It does not.
Or
So
these
ones-
are additional ones on top of that?
And those ones we wouldn't deal with those as a change order. We would deal with those through the cash allowance that we have for utilities.
Okay.
So we would increase that, because that way the contractor doesn't apply his markup to that work. It's a direct cost.
Thank you.
Councilor Schnarr?
Okay, so the increase is going through here. Do we have a total exactly what it's gonna cost us more?
For the department.
Like for the entire project? Because like you keep saying cost overrides expenses. And I'm looking at some totals here, but is that gonna be the end total, or is there some more surprises coming that, I mean, we're not directly blaming you like transportation and TELUS and that, so I mean,
Yeah.
these things do happen.
We do have some additional costs that we're aware of. So at this point, I don't foresee it being more than $30,000 to $40,000. These are coordination issues between disciplines. So,
Okay.
and that doesn't include the cost for the utilities. But apart from that, I'm not aware of any.
I'm just gonna say.
Any other questions? So on your TELUS and Fortis, they're gonna bury in the same trench?
No, they have different.
They're gonna put
They have
different.
different requirements for their conduits, so.
Okay.
So it's, we're exploring opportunities for using the same contractor to install them, but I can't promise it till they're agreed to do it.
So will they trench it or will they bore it?
It's gonna be trenched,
It's gonna trench it in that, eh?
yeah.
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to the delegates here. So you mentioned that there would possibly be some additional infrastructure required to make a potable water out of this. What type of infrastructure?
No, we're not gonna drink this.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I believe it says it in the package.
So I guess what we were talking about was the potable water fill station, so there was.
Truck fill.
Truck
Truck
fill,
fill.
yes,
Okay.
so a truck fill would be added in the area of the existing grey water truck fills. So it would be still connected to the potable water system, it would just be physically located in that area. And to be located in that area, the overhead power lines would need to be moved underground.
Oh, okay.
But there is no physical connection between the wastewater treatment plant and the potable fill stations.
Okay,
Well,
sorry.
I just
was
wanted to
But
make
it's-
it clear
yes,
that
the
we're
gas station, yeah.
we're not turning the sewage into drinking water.
Right, of course.
So even if you use it for frowning.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, any other questions? No? Okay. That is your report, is it? I don't see any other questions, so I'd like to say thank you for coming to give us a presentation on that. And I know we've all been kind of asking, you know, what's been going on out there all the time and that, and never to get in this, see a site tour and that, because there's really nothing to see at the time when they're going out to that, eh? But I'm glad you guys came. Now I have an understanding of what's going on, the progress is going on out there, so it really helps us out in that to understand what's happening here.
Once we got a little further on the backfilling between the CTUs, then I'll work with Dawa to try to arrange a meeting for whoever's interested.
That'd be great. I think we'd all be interested in coming out and see what's going on and that, so yeah.
It's much nicer to do it before we run sewage.
For sure.
And this may be biased, but I think there are a few more interesting places than a wastewater plant. They're
No one
very,
agrees this much.
especially when they're, like Mike said, before they're commissioned. It's pretty neat to see the equipment that's going on and the biological processes that are planned.
You know, and there is, I know when I've been to FCM quite a few times or whatever and that, and I've gone on the different tours of different plants, like in Ottawa, Winnipeg and stuff like that, just to see what goes on so that when you guys are building here, I'd have a better idea what's going on. And yeah, it's not the most glamorous place to be in that, but you get an idea what's going
The
on.
processes are the same, the scale
Yeah.
is quite a bit different. But
You betcha, yeah, for sure. So I know, I think it was Winnipeg, they do a lot of burning.
That's new pick or?
Yes, and I do, they got a big stack up there, but they do a lot of burning in that, they get rid of everything, I believe that's the place that, so, yeah.
They're still considered?
I believe they may be, I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like that. Councillor Schnarr.
Yeah, as far as the actual tour goes, that's what I would look forward to, because we did spend a lot of money, and, you know, just to see what's there, that way when you're showing us a presentation, we can fully understand what all the screening and different stuff, and we can explain to the taxpayers where we spent their money and why, so I honestly look forward to the tour. But yes, prior to starting up would be probably a lot more pleasant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you want, but we understand if you want to run, so no problem.
This, that.
Okay, moving on then. F2, engineering and planning. Streetlights Fortis LED conversion program. Dawit, I believe you're up.
So, we have received a quotation from Fortis to work on the streetlights that do not belong to Fortis. Because as you know, for the LED conversion program, we have an agreement with Fortis to convert all HPS lights to LED. But we do that through a different arrangement that Fortis came up with or proposed is the maintenance multiplier, which is about 9% that will be added to our distribution costs, to our total power bill. Our power bills, as you know, are divided into the power itself, the transmission, and the distribution. So a 9% increment into the distribution will be made for the LED program. So that will take care of about 1,300 lights in town, street lights in town. So we went back to Fortis asking them, what about those lights for which that you don't own and for which you don't have the conversion program? So they gave us a quotation, and that quote includes not just the replacement of street lights, but also illuminating areas of town that are currently dark and not sufficient light, and the combination of that and converting non-Fortis lights from HPS to LED. That includes also the decorative lights, like on the main street, where we have decorated street light poles, but not convenient to do the LED conversion because it can't carry the LED unless they do some modifications. So replacing about 70 street poles on the main street and adding more illumination to parts of town where we see it's in darkness, some of these areas, and also replacing the headlights, all the decorative and others that do not belong to Fortis, into LED. The combination of all that is costing about $500,000, also a little over $500,000 that's presented to you. So the intent of bringing this to the committee is we had that $350,000 set aside when we thought originally that we are front-ending the LED conversion program, and in 3 years, the first year would have cost us $350,000. So we said, hey, let's convert this to do this other task. But finally, when we received the numbers from Fortis, as you can see, it's different. So we are asking the committee to recommend to council that we get the access to the remaining money, maybe from the energy reserve, if that's acceptable to council eventually. Or the alternative would be to work to the extent of the money that's budgeted for, and keep the rest, for the next year or so. The only little catch there is if they had to mobilize again, then costs naturally would add. If we had to go at it at one go, then we'd be dealing with all our illumination and LED conversion issues at one go with the budget, with the quote that they have presented today before us.
Mayor Zahir, and then Councilor Byer.
Well, thanks for that update, Dawit, through the chair. So I have a comment and a question. I'm fully in support of moving forward and getting all this done this year, and then pausing and not doing maybe anything next year just to recoup those costs that we were going to be spending this year for those additional lights. I'm just wondering which areas would be covered in terms of the lights that are currently missing.
My flash drive, I'm looking for it. I hope. Yeah, I do. I was worried that I left it on my desk.
So I guess if we are going to do this, I want to make sure we're not missing any areas. I know 3rd Avenue is certainly a big concern. There's other areas as well, so I want to make sure everything is covered to the best of extent.
I think while Dawit, you can go ahead and get ready there. So when TELUS did this, they actually surveyed the entire community and recommended to their standards, their basic standards, to where we had what we would refer to as dark areas. So, but Dawit will have a map here in just a moment where he can then show specifically where that is. You're prepared if I turn that on there now. I see Steve coming.
Go ahead, Councilor Byer, you might as well ask the question while we're
Okay.
getting that.
So my question through the chair to Dawit, I believe, or CEO. So just a little bit of clarity. Does this mean that if we go ahead with the $500,000, doing it in one shot, that the town won't be charged the additional 9% on the utility bill? Like, is that in lieu of?
Yeah, these are two different programs. The 9% is, Fortis owns some 1,300 lights in our town.
Right.
So they have, they put that into what they call rate 31. And for all those lights that are in rate 31, Fortis has a program to replace all HPS lights into LED through that maintenance multiplier program, which is about 9% of the distribution. So that program does not include other lights that don't belong to Fortis. So what we're trying to deal with is how do we convert, for example, like the decorative lights on Main Street, how do we convert these as we continue with our conversion program for the rest of the town. So we asked a quotation for those that are outside the Fortis program. So that includes, like I said, the Main Street decorative lights and all the other works that they plan to do within that budget. And this is a map from them. I need to exaggerate very much. Like, this is now on the northwest part of town. So as you can see, they are saying that they'll be adding 2 lights for illumination purposes, and there are existing poles but with no lights on them. They'll be putting lights, 19 of 100 watt and 1 of 150, about 20 lights here. And they'll continue to do the same on many areas. For example, like one particular area is here by the Independence Store, or north of it, and west of it on third. Like in here, you can see this is the Independent. Now north of it, we don't have any illumination, and we have 3rd Avenue west of Independent, or west of 45th Street. There's no illumination, so they will be adding new poles to carry new headlights to illuminate those areas. And like on the Main Street here, these are the decorative lights that are not compatible to their program of replacing or converting to LED. Therefore, the cost will include replacing all these decorative poles, not just the lights. Like other decorative lights, for example, as you know, we have by the museum or by 49th Street between, I think, 6th to 9th Ave. All those will be able to carry the LED without having to replace the poles. But this particular one on Main Street needs both, replacing the poles and also fitting them with LED lights. So it's a combination of all this that's costing us now 500, and all this is outside the Fortis program to replace some 1,300 lights in town.
Councillor Sorensen.
My question is with the reserve financing. What's it at now, and what will it be drawn down to if we use $235,000 for that?
I think Ms. Bittner is here, maybe.
Sarah's in the back.
I don't have the figure with me exactly, but I know that reserve has the money in it, and it usually is put aside for these types of projects only. So that reserve is set aside for this. It's not coming from any other reserve.
Might I suggest we would certainly be able to bring forward those specific numbers when this came forward for consideration. Yeah, I think that there's certainly administration is comfortable that there's sufficient reserves there to fund this project.
And I have to agree, I think we asked last time, and I think, Sarah, you said that we had a fair bit in there, so we were covered for pretty well all of it as a matter of fact then. Councillor Curry, then Councillor Schnard.
Just through the chair. So how many added lights with this are we gonna have? Like with the poles and stuff? I'm just trying to look at this to see what is because this is completely separate.
Yes.
And then, so how many additional lights, I know we'll be having the upgrades, but how many additional lights will we be adding to the community with this?
The additional lights are over 100 something. One thing that we are doing as we present this report to you is actually verifying whether those lights that they have through their studies identified as non-illuminated do really, if the case is that.
Yeah.
So that part of the work we're not done yet. So by the time we're just bringing it in principle, this is what the study shows, and the budget, the money required is this amount, and we're seeking your recommendation to council if we can proceed with that, subject to us verifying all those areas, which
But-
we will.
It'll be 100 plus.
Yeah, 100
new
plus, that's-
additional.
Yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Shenard?
Actually, through the chair, where we're talking about the town owns some poles, like a very low percentage, if we're changing, is there an advantage to us owning the poles or disadvantage? Maybe at this time, just let Fortis own every pole in town, that way they're responsible?
So there was an agreement between town many years ago and Fortis, and I think at the time, some 600 or so lights were transferred to Fortis against some payment.
Right.
But since then, like for example, Hillenden is an example. When we install those lights, automatically they are reverted to Fortis, and that's why the cost is substantially reduced on the part to the town, because they are owning it. So any new light or in any new subdivision is automatically reverted to Fortis. If there are few which like very recently they paid us some $21,000, finance knows about that, is for the street lights that we converted into LED on 40th Street, right from the roundabout heading north. That was not theirs, therefore instead of us paying them to do that the LED, they actually paid us some $20,000. So wherever there are that are missing, and the only that I know of, and as far as Fortis goes, was that street on 40th Street, that has been converted or given to them or sold to them.
So then to carry on with my question though, is how many street lights does the town still own? Like, I mean, if they're the majority, we might as well turn them all over to them in time and.
None that I know of. Like for example, lights
Yes.
in IGA or Walmart do not belong to the town.
No, what I'm saying is like the ones you're saying on, actual Main Street, where those are lights decorative. Now, at this time, would it be to our advantage to turn them, like, of course, private ones don't, but Main Street, turn them over to Fortis and let Fortis own all of them? That way Fortis is responsible for changing maintenance and everything, then the liability is all Fortis and the town no longer has poles on virtually public. I mean, I agree, IJ in that's not ours, it's
Yes.
not our concern.
Yes, so the only lights that I know that Fortis does not know or that does not own is the decorative lights.
Okay.
They don't own decorative lights for their own reasons. But this is something I think we can, especially after the conversion, maybe bring it up and discuss.
Counselor Mickelson?
This, through the chair, it's very out of season, but if those decorative lights change, what happens with our Christmas decorations that are put up there?
I think one
Or
of
if
the,
Fortis owned them, could we still put up the Christmas decorations?
I think we can. One of the questions that Steve asked me, if some of the sports would be impacted as a result of the conversion program. Of course, this one is outside the conversion program. We'll continue to do whatever we've been doing with those poles. There shouldn't be a problem, yes.
All right, thank you.
I feel like the question is on the lights here and that, going over the overpass and on the golf course road. Are they gonna change those out too?
Yeah, they are part of the
That's included
conversion
in that
program,
too, eh?
yes.
Okay, I just never read that there, so I just kinda wondered that, so. Mayor Zahar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was interested in looking at that map because you highlighted some really dark areas of town. So I'm going to be very happy to see that those areas illuminated, especially at nighttime. It's obviously really hard to see in those areas.
Yeah.
I think that will help with some of the crime issues in some of those areas as well. So.
Administration too would be happy to provide this map for council to see and spend some time looking at it in greater
Sure.
detail as well. Yeah.
Councilor Byer?
Through the chair to administration, is there any expected cost savings to come from this with the switchover of turning to LED on the electric bill? Is there anything foreseen?
Yeah, that's what we are told. The benefit to the town obviously is the components of the power bill. With LED, the consumption is reduced by about 30%. Therefore, the power bill goes down as well.
The one other benefit that we are familiar with is the light pollution is greatly reduced with LED lighting as well.
So it'll be like Jasper.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do you have anything else, Dalit?
Unless there is anything from you.
So just to bring this to council, would be comfortable for this to come forward for consideration at council.
I
Thank
think
you.
so. Okay, thank you, Dalit.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna back up here. I believe we have delegations here now. Early Childhood Matters.
Make sure they introduce themselves.
Thank you, Dalit. Thank you, gentlemen.
I'm glad you're doing this, not me.
Oh, can I open that door, please? Yeah. I guess before we start, can we get you to introduce yourselves?
My name is Christy Gamoka, and I'm the Director of Programs and Services at the Edson Friendship Center. I'm also the coordinator of the Early Childhood Coalition, as well as a member.
And my name is Anna Vanderhaeg, and in town, I'm the occupational therapist. I do contract work with preschool age children and worked in Edson and area since 2000, so going on 18 years. I am the chairperson for the Early Childhood Matters Coalition and also a member.
So we are here this morning to talk about our 2016 Early Development Instrument results that we received, I think, back in December. What we have decided to do is we're actually presenting to all the policymakers first. So we were at Grand Yellowhead last week. We were at Yellowhead County this morning. You guys, and then Living Waters will be later into June. After that is done, what we will be doing is taking it to the community, inviting them for a strategic meeting where we will be using the results for some more in-depth kinds of strategies that we will be utilizing from this data. So, Anne's gonna go first.
And this data is all public, just so that everybody is aware. Most people don't know about it yet. So up above is our Early Childhood Matters, our coalition group, vision, mission, that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to give some history about why we are even a coalition. So going back in 2009, the government of Alberta launched the Early Child Development, the ECD Mapping Initiative, as part of a 5-year plan to gather information on the development of kindergarten-aged children in Alberta. The purpose of the initiative was to, which was led by the Ministry of Education, was to study the children's development progress by the end of the first 5 formative years and learn more about the environmental factors that may be influencing their development, both positive and negative. Large body of scientific research shows that the children's early experiences are biologically embedded in their rapidly developing brains and nervous systems and have lifelong consequences regarding their health, productivity, well-being, and of course, learning. To ensure that children have the supports and opportunities they need to thrive and do well, it helps to know how they're doing and how their environments in which they're being raised are affecting their development both positively and negatively. Having this kind of research data provides evidence for sound policy making, decision making. Previous to this project, there had been like little small pilot projects done throughout the province of Alberta, but never the entire province having been mapped. The Early Development Instrument, so we're going to talk about that. That's the EDI, Early Development Instrument. It was created by the Oxford Centre of Child Studies at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and has been used by other provinces in Canada. That was selected as the tool that was going to measure the early development of children. So we were not the first province to do this in Canada. We were maybe the 4th province or so to decide, let's try to map the entire province. Sounds crazy when we think about it. The EDI was collected by school authorities, so all the kindergarten teachers and all the kindergartens in our coalition area, under the supervision of Alberta Education. The analysis, the data collection, and the community engagement was contracted out to the Community University Partnership for the Study of Children, Youth and Families, or CUP, CUP, based at the University of Alberta. CUP built a team, and in the summer of 2009, Early Childhood Development Mapping Project, or ECMAP, which was when the majority of us heard about it even in our community, began its research and community engagement work. They actually came to us. We had a large community meeting down at the old health unit, and as many people as could be were invited, and they came and gave us a presentation that we were kind of like, what are you guys doing? It was very foreign to us at the time. It took us actually a lot of thinking and talking afterwards to actually get the idea of really what they were doing, it being such a huge, broad, province-wide data collection thing that they were planning. So over the 5-year period between 2009 to 2014, ECMAP completed a lot of functions. They analyzed, so more than 90,000 kindergarten age students across Alberta were assessed. Over 70,000 children's data was deemed full so that they could actually analyze it at the community level. The EDI baseline for the entire province of Alberta then was also created from that data that was collected. More than 100 early childhood development community coalitions were created in Alberta, us being one of them. They analyzed the socioeconomic status for the communities and Alberta as a whole, also getting a baseline for all of that. They assisted coalitions in collecting information on their community resources, so created like a resource booklet of what we even had for children and families with young children. And then we created provincial community maps displaying the EDI results, information on the socioeconomic status, and community resources. Okay.
So one of the reasons why the results are really important is the government has connected additional funding to the results. And we have 3 examples. Hinton's 2014 results were lower than the rest, and they received additional funding to their coalition. And outside of the coalitions, even what we're seeing is that they're using these results for other type of funding. For example, Fox Creek, whose results came back in much of a deficit, received an entire Parent Link Center to themselves because of those results. And Ardrossan.
Yeah, and Ardrossan, I always wondered how Ardrossan had that enormous, beautiful rec facility built there. And just recently I was able to find that data that they actually used their EDI results for their community. That basically was the main reason why they got that beautiful facility there in Ardrossan. My husband's actually from Ardrossan, so we went back there once. I'm like, what? Why does Ardrossan have that?
So interpreting the results, and we'll go through the results, I'd like to remind you that the results are for Edson and area, so we include Yellowhead County, so we go from McKay Road right down to Robb and Marlborough area. So that's our area. Hinton, Jasper have their own coalition, and then there's one on the east end as well. Yes, we
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So when you're looking at the results, this is just a reminder that the green means that these are the kids that are on track. They're within the 75 percentile. The yellow are kids who are showing somewhat a couple of red flags, so they're at risk and they're within the lower 25th percentile. And then our vulnerable kids are kids who are lower than our 10th percentile. So just a reminder as we're going through. And some of them we scored fairly well at, so we're not going to spend a lot of time in, and we'll probably just do more of a focus on.
Okay, Councillor Sorensen.
Sir, can you give me an example of evidence for each of those, like for the at-risk and the vulnerable?
Like the percentiles, like why they use that breakdown?
Can you describe a child in that?
We will. We're going to talk about, so the EDI actually measures 5 domains, developmental domains, and so physical health and well-being is our first one, communication skills, general knowledge, emotional maturity, social competence, and language and thinking skills. So those are the 5 developmental domains that the EDI assesses. And then we will be talking about our data in our coalition area on those 5 domains. And then I'll try to, the areas that we're not doing as great on and we're worse than provincial averages, then we will be talking more in depth about them. The other ones I'll just kind of give you a blip of what it means, what that means, and then and those are determined by the EDI, so created by the project. Yeah.
So physical health and well-being, as you can tell, I've provided the 2016 results, the Alberta average, as well as our 2014 results. So this was our primary focus for the last 2 years as a coalition, because we were low in 2014 and we actually lost ground. And so we are 10% lower than the provincial average in terms of kids who are within that on-track area. Some of the things that we have done previously to address this is we partnered up with the Tumblers Gymnastics Association and provided free access to indoor play space for our most vulnerable population. And I'm pretty sure that most of you are very familiar with the Green Shacks. So there's 5 Green Shacks in Edson. There's one in Wilmore, Centennial Park, Glenwood, Tiffin, Kinsman, and then we'll have a 6th.
West Haven.
Oh, West Haven.
And then a 7th. Yeah.
Hillendale's has been bought and it's just ready to head over there. I would like to think that we were trailblazers with the Green Shacks, but it was a total ripoff from the city of Edmonton. It's something that the city of Edmonton has been doing for years. It's equipped with all types of gross motor types of activities. It's actually not even just a 6, like we put some older kid stuff in there, as well as we switch it out for winter and summer activities. Some of the successes that we've seen with the Green Shacks is that the ones that are embedded in the actual neighborhoods, what we're seeing is that the residents in that area are actually maintaining them. Actually, this year, we've been really slow to get out there to switch them over to summer, and some of the residents have taken it upon themselves to do the work. So,
with notes left to us.
Yes, please do this. And so we've had lots of success.
It's awesome. I love it.
Councillor Curry,
sorry, just through the chair, can you, I think this is maybe what you're getting at, can you, for this, give an example of a child that would be vulnerable, what the traits would look like, so that just clearer understanding?
Okay, yeah. So the EDI is many pages long. The kindergarten teacher has to get to know the kindergarten student first, so they're not allowed to do the EDI with the student until later in the school year. February, March, I believe, is data collection. And so they really get time to actually get to know the child, see what their physical endurance is and health is. Do they come to school rested every day? Are they often tired? Do they come with healthy food, snacks? Do they seem like they've been eaten in the morning? Are they cared for, that physical health type stuff, the well-being? The physical health, can they physically make it through a day? Do they have the endurance to sit in class? Do they have the endurance to participate in gym class? Are they always tired? And then basic jumping skills, ball skills, that kind of stuff. So that's under physical health and well-being. Those are the general themes of the questions that are asked of the kindergarten teacher. Yeah. Thank you.
Social competence.
Social competence. So social competence, so encouraging, so I'm reading a definition of the 5 domains here. So social competence, encouraging curiosity about the world, respect for adults and other children, following rules and instructions, independence and self-confidence. So social confidence, provincial averages around 25%, and our 2014 and 2016 data right around 28% of children at the at-risk or vulnerable areas. And so it hasn't moved a lot, where we chose not to focus on that area. It's only a little bit above provincial averages. It's right near it. Next one. Emotional maturity. So emotional maturity would be encouraging age-appropriate emotional understanding, empathy, reflection, and controlled actions, thinking before doing. So this is an area that we've lost a lot of ground on in the last few years. Our provincial average is around 26%. 2014 we were about 28%, so right close to averages. And we've dropped to 36% of our children entering kindergarten struggling in the areas of emotional maturity. So more than 1 in 3 kids coming into kindergarten having difficulties with at-risk or vulnerable yellow or red areas with emotional maturity. So being able to not have meltdowns or blow-ups, or being able to understand somebody else's perspective, you know, we'll share toys with somebody, that kind of stuff. Will be able to understand, you know, oh, what they did was maybe not quite the right thing to have done, you know, that those are kind of some of the questions in that area.
And this is something that Anna and I, because we're working in the area, we absolutely have seen. We can provide actual
data on it.
Our own
data on it.
Like for example, the Brighter Futures program uses a test called Ages and Stages Social Emotional. A 70 is where kids, and it can start, this test starts at 0 to 6. 70 is where red flags start going off, and we have 2-year-olds who are in the triple digits. So these are kids who are emotionally unregulated at the age of 2. So if you can only imagine that without intervention, those are the kids that we're sending to school. And I know, exactly. You talk to we know. I know because I'm in every single kindergarten classroom and every single early intervention program, so I know. And I also do want to point out that when you're talking about kids 0 to 6, you're talking about their parents. So the emotional mental health of a parent is in direct correlation with the mental health of their children. And so it's you know, you have to think of all the parents as well.
Yeah, and how we can target in the next areas that we're going to hope to focus on. You know, we've created these, the physical health, of course, and well-being. We have to target families and parents, and you know, try to get people out and being physically active and such, and which is why we've tried doing the resources that we have done and the partnerships with the amazing groups that we have in town and county. So how are we going to do that same kind of approach with the emotional maturity type area? It's a harder way to think about how we're going to do it. It's not as tangible of setting up a green shack and hoping people use it. So we have to really be a little bit more creative in how we're going to do that, and how we're going to help support everybody in their programs too. Language and cognitive development. This encourages reading, writing, classification of shapes, numbers, colors, size, and concepts. So the kind of early pre-kindergarten, preschool readiness concepts that we think of. So language and thinking skills, provincial average is around 24%. 2014, we were below average, provincial averages. We were better at 22%. In 2016, around 26%. You can talk about that too. I think we have lots of programs.
So one of the things that Edson is, we're very grateful for, is that we have a lot of early childhood development programs in Edson, and we are able to work on a lot of these skills with kids prior to kindergarten. So those pre-kindergarten skills, we would have been very surprised if they came back really low, because we have a lot of kids who are accessing programs and services prior to kindergarten. And the other area that we are really very fortunate to have is we have a lot of early literacy programs in our community, so we're able to work on that as well.
And communication and general knowledge. Communication and general knowledge encompasses encouraging open communication of needs and wants in a socially appropriate way, storytelling, and an appropriate awareness of the outside world. In this area, the provincial average is kind of the lowest area of the provincial, and they do the poorest in provincially at 31%. Our data in 2014 is a little hard to understand here, because our data actually shows that this was our worst area at 36.7%. We received our data late into 2015 actually, and by that time we'd already received kind of early data. We had 2 data releases, and the physical health and well-being was so much higher than everybody else's, or worse than that. We chose that one. That one wasn't as low of an area, and we focused on that. And then we got our second set of data, and we were not able to focus on 2 areas at once. We just took 1 area, just so you know. And then by 2016, our most recent data, we've actually improved that significantly, and we're 28% of our children are experiencing difficulty or great difficulty in that area. So we're really happy. We hope it's because we do a lot of early intervention in the sense of identification of children who might have some language skill deficits. We've got excellent resources in our early intervention programs and with Alberta Health as well. And we're hoping that maybe that's showing that what we're doing is actually paying off. By the time they come to kindergarten, they may have speech delays and stuff like that, but they're able to make their basic needs known. They're able to ask for help. They're able to, be understood generally and all that stuff instead of having those significant deficits. So that's our guess. We don't have, reasons for that.
So in the next couple upcoming years, when we get together with the community, the two focuses that we will be working on strategically is physical health and well-being as well as emotional maturity, as we have mentioned. So now to the town of Edson. One of the things that we've done with all of our presenters is provided you with 2 slides, one with kudos of the great stuff that you've been doing, and then another slide with considerations for the future. I want to say that I am appreciative, and so is Anna, of all the work that the town has done for the Green Shacks. Garnet has been an absolute gem to work with. He got them painted, they got moved because some residents wanted them in a different place, and it has been amazing. So we really hope that that continues on. FCSS does some great family drop-in, and one of the things that when we talk about emotional maturity is that we have got to get away from years of dropping our kids off to programs and leaving to start to do some programming with our children. So parent-child interactive activities, and definitely FCSS is leading the community in that area. Wilmore, of course, it is our gem. Snowshoe rentals. I asked all the members of the coalition, so some of this stuff. FCSS has been a huge supporter of the coalition and has provided a lot of resources. Park space is good. Kudos for getting the Hillendale Park playground up and running. It looks amazing, as well as offering some affordable options in the community.
Like toonie swims, the free swims, that kinds of stuff that are partnered with the town. So that stuff all in just the last couple of years, basically a lot of stuff. It's been really, really exciting from my point of view, because I had this data and a few people did, but not many, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. It really lines up with what we need to do for our community.
You really have to go out to the Green Shack in Wilmore. That's a pretty cool Green Shack out there for sure. Some of the considerations, one of the things that the coalition is looking at additional funding where we will buy the gazebos, and hopefully the town is okay with that, and we will put them by the Green Shack. This is in line with, I believe that Yvonne Rempel did a presentation on cancer prevention, and so some of our green spaces need some additional shade space. Yvonne's group also is providing us with sports umbrellas for each of the Green Shacks, so they should be in there in the next couple of weeks, and we're pretty excited about that. And it also, what we're trying to do is provide some additional parent-child interactive activities programming in some of those park spaces in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods. So the gazebo will allow us to do that without worrying about setting up tents and taking them down and that sort of thing. So that's one thing. We always need indoor play space. We're under snow 8 months out of the year, at least longer this year. So when you're strategically looking at the new facility, indoor play space is a high priority for us for sure. I talked about the balance between scheduled programming and unscheduled programming. One of the things that we can spend a lot of time about is that we have programmed parents to believe that if you send your child to hockey or swimming or dance, that they're getting enough physical activity. And one of the things that we talk about quite often is that swimming lessons are really important. They're a life skill. However, we need parents in the pool as well. So balancing that time out between programming time and unscheduled programming time. Walkability is an issue when you live on a highway, and also just to continue on with that focus being of parent and child-based activities rather than drop-off activities. And I think it's time for you to ask us some questions.
Councillor Sorensen.
Do you know, can you give me like a ballpark, the size of this population that you're talking about, that age group in Edson and Yellowhead area? How many kids are in that group?
I think from the last one we see, there's around 300 kids. The results were done on 171 kids.
And out of, follow-up question, out of 300 kids,
Well, 171 was done in 2016. That would have been about our population of kindergarten children
Okay.
in our area. Our data on 2014 was a double collection, and so they had 1 year. Because they had the years between 2009 and 2014 to collect the data. So we had about 350 were analyzed at that time. So we have about twice as many. But
Really,
it's
it's about
171.
170.
Yeah.
so
Yeah. I mean, I can count every single classroom. I can tell you that's right about accurate. Yeah. They take the children with the most severe medical needs are removed from the equation, so they're not included in the data. That's across province. They do that. And those are any other data that isn't complete. So if they started the assessment, they didn't finish it, or some other data is not in there, then they.
But that's the cohort leaving the age range that you're trying to help.
Yeah.
So there's actually about 4 or 5 times that amount of kids that you're trying to help, right?
Yeah, that would be a guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So out of those, how many are in, for lack of a better term, organized daycare system, or? do you know?
We actually had tried to figure that out last year. I think it was. We actually sat down and we tried extrapolating that data and trying to figure out how many we had. I mean, because there's enough of us at the Early Childhood Matters Coalition table that know where all the kids are, kind of. And we had figured that, what was it?
It was well over 80%
yeah, it was
of kids.
Huge number of kids.
So that seems to be like an area of focus, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Focus on daycares?
On all early childhood development programming, it doesn't matter, what door they walk through. It really pretty much looks similar when you talk early childhood.
But the strategies you've put forward here don't look like daycare strategies,
Those are just for us.
right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, so you, okay.
Daycare will have their own strategies.
To improve.
They will be invited to that meeting, the strategic meeting, to come up
Yeah.
with what they can do.
Great,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, just if it's possible, I'd really like a copy of that EDI, just to know sort of what you're checking. That would be great. And again, really, when you look at this, it does seem as though mental health, of course, is a huge issue everywhere. But parenting workshops, can a person focus more on that?
That
'Cause I don't
is
think
a
there's
loaded question, and I agree with
I
you.
don't
We've had this discussion many times, and we sure wish we could do that. In the sense of, if we could offer it, would people come? And we're having a really hard time offering things that people commit to. And this goes across not just our coalition, but it's kind of a generational thing that's happening. So we're trying to figure a way that we can connect with that generation of parents in maybe a way that is more comfortable to them, or a way that they are would appreciate it better, or be able to take in the information. So we're considering things such as digital stuff and videos, using our Facebook page and stuff like
Many people don't
that.
have computers, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I know.
Parent education is probably going to be the
It's gonna be
biggest
the
struggle.
hardest.
It is going to be the biggest struggle for sure.
But meeting them where they are, for instance, there is a gazebo at the community garden.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's a parent who doesn't want to be the best parent they can be. Just
Oh,
sometimes they just need that little help from people, and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's up to us as a community to try to give that help.
Yeah, make it easy, accessible. I mean, a perfect example is the West Haven park, where our green shack is this big, huge green area with no shade. A parent down the road has 3 kids and a little baby. What's she gonna do with the shade option, or even if it rains or whatever? So those are the things. Well, we can make it more accessible if we have a place that they can come. Then we can maybe do some programming there, which FCSS has been so amazing with. man, if they can start doing programming at those locations and get people out, then they can start doing some of the parenting part too, in some information and some tips, and have a talk about just on the fly stuff about bedtimes or routines or things like that, which are really, really important. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to figure out how can we all, because we all work together, we're all at the table with our coalition, it's amazing, but how can we tweak things?
But that walkability too, because
Yeah.
many people don't have any vehicle, and they
Yeah.
have no means of transportation, so
Yeah,
we really have to meet them where they're at.
yeah.
And that's the purpose of having the green checks in the neighborhood too.
Right,
So
that
it's
is great.
Yeah, like, and where can we, you know, how can we make it so it's accessible to them? And we are, you know, in talks with GYPSD in the sense of there is getting ready for kindergarten kind of curriculum out there.
Right.
And so we are really trying to think of how can we partner as a large group, a community, and offer that as a curriculum, you know, that's, you know, they have to sign up for, and they have to come for so many sessions, but they would learn about these very important areas of parenting that was going to help with that, all those areas of development, right?
Because they have done it at the basement of the Red Brick, but not
Yeah.
everyone goes to the basement
That's
of the
right.
Red Brick, yeah.
Yeah. So we're trying to be creative and think of ideas and want ideas from
Different
people.
spots.
Yeah.
Councillor Perry?
Through the chair, you just answered my one, or did I was gonna ask you to talk about the kindergarten open house.
Sorry, I'm just going to say one more time too, or make sure you guys are aware. So Parent Link Center, FCSS has created rack cards like this with the domains listed. They're color coded. We have pull-up banners that we loan out to people, and then their programming, if you look in the publications in town, they actually will highlight what their programming is addressing. So we're trying to, like, if you want to call it brand that or whatever you want to call it, but we need the public to be aware of these areas of development, and then that they can maybe pick some programming to help their family's needs or areas of want or whatever. So we haven't started doing that from our coalition so much. We want the data to meet with everybody first, go through this data first before we start putting it out into the public a lot via, you know, social media and stuff like that. Sorry.
Thoughts on why the substantial decrease in emotional maturity?
Can I throw it back at you? What do you think your thoughts are? I think everyone knows what some of the main reasons are. A change in our culture, a change in parenting, a change in, you know, letting kids just be outside and play with the neighbors and do that kind of stuff and explore that whole thing, and the amount of digital time that is spent with children. So that immediate gratification, not having to wait for anything, you know, can't take you shopping without you looking at an iPad or a phone the whole time you're in the grocery cart when you're 1 year old or 2 years old. Those things develop habits that change the brain structure and therefore make it difficult for kids.
Councillor Dwyer?
Through the chair. Thank you for the green shacks. I live in West Haven, and it is really nice to go out there. The shade thing is definitely something that's come up when other parents have come out, and you know, and you're like, oh, okay, it's hot, and there's like about 3 trees there.
3 trees,
Kind of
yeah.
But something else I've noticed, it's a great way to build the community of that neighborhood. That's something that I've met of other neighbors that I haven't met elsewhere in town, and it's like, oh, you live here, and we have the same age kids, so it's really nice that way too, right? Which maybe it wasn't intended for that, I'm not sure. A question. Are there any funding opportunities? You had talked about the indoor play space for the multiplex or other initiatives that we're looking at right now?
I don't know of anything specific to indoor play space. I know that I sit on a couple of committees with Hinton, who is struggling with the identical issue, right? Equipment is expensive, space is expensive, and the problem is that you need to keep it very affordable in order for your most vulnerable population to be utilizing it. And so they're struggling just along with the rest of us in how to do that.
Yeah. Like, do you try to make the outside free parks and stuff as accessible as possible, and add maybe some structures that will encourage some of that physical literacy stuff instead of making everything so safe-ish? You know, how do we do that? I know some communities are looking at that and, you know, putting, you know, stumps and big boulders and rocks and things like that so kids can climb and jump and that kind of stuff, which doesn't cost a whole lot of infrastructure. It costs a little bit of setup, obviously, and manpower. So I know some coalitions across the province are looking at that. The problem being the winter months are really challenging, and it needs to be an indoor place. And then how can we make that affordable that isn't a drop-in fee of $5 every time, or, you know, that just is going to be really unattainable for some families. So how do we partner with groups? How do we, you know, how do we do things that might look a little different? I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. If I may have a question. Intuitively to me, it seems that a child who would be vulnerable at risk in one area is likely to be vulnerable at risk in multiple areas. Do you have some, does it indicate how likely it is that kids are just behind in general rather than in one area?
See if I can pull it up here, right here. So vulnerable in one area, and then they give us data in 2 or more domains, is they'll give us data on that. So 12% of our population is vulnerable in 2 or more domains overall. Yeah, but you're right. And then there's more breakdown in this report. It just only has that one data.
I can speak about the changes that I have seen personally over the last 20 years, is that the vulnerable population set has now expanded, and it's not what, as professionals, we would have identified 20 years ago. So we are seeing, and one of the things that is the examples that I give all the time, there was an EDI area in the middle of Edmonton that came from a very affluent part of Edmonton, and their language communication skills were like rock bottom, and they couldn't figure out for the life of them like how this affluent area ended up with these really poor literacy skills. Well, they found out that the majority of the families there had nannies.
Of course. Yep.
And the nannies were English as a second language. So we are seeing a lot of different factors becoming involved in that.
And the provincial data that they had is there's a 2014 final report that you can find online. Actually, it's really long. It's really interesting if you are so inclined. And it had it explained that yes, the SES data is really good information to get on a community, but that doesn't mean if you have low SES that your community's EDI results are going to be low. It actually, that isn't the the most relevant correlation. The most relevant correlation is, do you have resources available for those families? If you've got a lot of resources and your SES is low, your data is probably going to be pretty good on your EDIs. So that actually is really telling, I think. When I read that, I'm like, wow, that's powerful stuff. So it isn't necessarily just our low economic families and at-risk families that are struggling.
Councillor Boyer.
Another question through the chair. Most of the graphs compare Edson to Alberta, and just one has Canada. Do we know how Alberta sits compared to Canada on the like generally on spectrum domains? Are they similar, or?
You know what? That's also in that 2014 data, and I did not print that page up because it was 70 pages long or something like that. So I don't think I have that.
I don't think I have that. I've seen it, but I don't think it's stuck with me. No.
If you do find it or want to, and you email it to me, I can forward that to council for information.
Any other questions? Councillor Sorensen.
Just one last one. You mentioned electronics and staying at home and watching TV, but those are Canada, North American wide problems, not Edson problems. So why, I still don't understand why Edson is not doing as well as Alberta.
I wish I could answer that question, because when you look at the resources we have in the community, we're pretty well equipped. That's something that definitely, once we take it to the community, we're going to have some more discussion about from what other service providers are looking at. Maybe it's just not a focus. Maybe we're spending too much time on other areas and not enough time on this. I'm not too sure, but we definitely. I was very disappointed on the physical health and well-being, because I thought we would have made up ground and we didn't.
Any other questions? No? Councillor Byer.
Through the chair, I thought of one more, in kind of follow-up to Councillor Sorensen's question. In the results of the kindergarten kids that are behind in one or more areas, is there any correlation back to, did they attend any of the programs, where do they live in town, is there anything to identify why they would be in that regard, like if, if everybody has access to TV and they're watching it, or they're just not getting enough exercise, is there anything else to give further indication that, or if they're not going to the programs, do they not go to the park, like how do we reach them?
I don't believe there was any other data. They collected the attending preschool, but nothing that again showed any unusual,
Anomalies.
nothing out of ordinary there. They didn't collect the SES this second time round.
I don't think we can answer that question.
Unfortunately.
But I think this is a common problem we have. It's not the availability of programs, it's people going to the programs, and you can't force people to go to the programs. And I think the same thing, we talked a little bit about parenting workshops, which I think are crucial, but I've been a few times, and if you go, who's there? Probably the families that are doing pretty well, generally speaking. And so those that most need that support are also the least likely to take advantage of some of the programs and things that are out there to help, and that's a societal question. I think that's not just a specific question. If we had the answer to that, then
we would have been doing it already. Unfortunately,
I think honestly that's Nobel Prize type stuff if you can figure out that type of thing. But.
The next anticipated data collection is going to be in 2019, which would be this February, March, I believe, is the next provincial data collection, and then it's usually a year after we get the reports.
Great. Thank you. No other questions? Anything else, ladies?
That's good. Thank you very much.
Well, no, thank you guys for coming to a presentation for us. It's we don't always know what's going on out there with their kids, their families, and that. So this is very nice to have.
And please share with the Green Shacks if there's anybody who has gently used or wants to donate. Just throw it in the Green Shack, and I mean it's really nice to keep those equipped as well as we can, because we do have a couple of balls that grow legs. But other than that, we're pretty good.
We feel that if a ball grows legs, that means a kid needed a ball. So we're happy about that too, or a sled. So.
Well, I know in your Green Shacks, I've heard nothing but positive comments from just about everybody that's used them, and even people that come to town, that are tourists, come to visit, and you take them out to one of the parks and they ask what that is, and you tell them, they like it. You know, it's a great addition out there. So I mean, even though, like I said, we didn't invent it, but we got it from somebody else, so it's working there. It's working for us.
Yes.
Well,
we made it better. We made it better.
The support from Parks is honestly, we couldn't have done it without them. And when we went to Garnet the first time with an idea, he's like, "I've seen those before. They're fabulous. I'm on." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't even have to sell it to you." I'm like, "This is awesome." It was just really.
It was great.
It was amazing.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Can I just add, because the
Yes, you can.
ladies forgot to mention, they're going to be putting books also
Oh, yes.
into those, so they're really adding to those and looking at putting signs up for community events and programming stuff, so really utilizing it to go beyond just the physical. So I know they were doing that, which will be phenomenal.
Right, there's lots of unopened scholastic books at garage sales always.
For sure. There's always lots of books.
Good.
Awesome.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Just, if I may add to, while we're just transitioning here, I think this is a really a part of why the focus change in our community service department with community development is it's to reach across the domains and recognize that so many of the activities and programs we're offering are trying to reach people on these various levels, and instead of thinking of something as a recreational program or as a cultural program, and start to think of all of this as developmental and both in the community sense, but also in terms of families and children and people. And so I think that is really what we're trying to achieve in making some of those adjustments there. But.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. F3, corporate services, virtual town hall credit card acceptance options. Sarah, what's that?
Continue without me.
Okay.
earlier in the year, I remember I showed you a little bit of a demo of what the virtual town hall would be. So moving forward, with the payment side of it, we need to have a discussion on whether credit cards will be accepted on the online portal. We've done some research of other municipalities. Generally, as a rule, municipalities haven't really gone with credit cards because of that fee that's attached to them, and that can become quite an expensive bill that has to be covered by taxation. It's a bit of a sort of a cyclical thing there. The only one we found that actually did credit cards for everything was Whitecourt. Most of the others, Hinton doesn't have any credit cards except through ActiveNet. Like we have ActiveNet for the booking of recreation facilities. They use the same one. Drayton was also through their recreation program. Sylvan Lake, Jasper, Hinton, no credit cards at all. Some allowed it on their online portal, but only for very minor things. Okotoks use it for their lawyers can then order tax certificates online, and they can use their credit cards to pay for those. So that's quite a very small amount. But moving forward, we did a discussion whether the town of Edson would like to accept credit cards. Is it a modern practice? Are we supposed to do that? But just the amount for the taxes is what would worry me if we started accepting credit card for taxes. That could end up being quite a hefty bill. A lot of people want those points on their card, and with taxes being a fairly larger amount, we may have quite a few people taking up on that offer. We could, however, offer it on utilities and accounts receivable, which is a bit of a lesser amount that we would have to cover. It just depends on what the committee and council would like to see moving forward.
Councillor Chenard, then Councillor Wilkinson, and Mayor Sahara.
Okay, actually through to the chair, I'm in total support of credit card payment if we want to keep up to the changing world. So a prime example, someone wants to pay their bill, they can phone it in. As far as the taxation, I don't think it would be 50% because a lot of people with mortgages, the bank does the collecting. But if you're a person from out of town and you want to pay your taxes, the convenience of credit card, I would say yes, I would be totally in favor of it. But yes, do monitor it just to see if there is a huge increase. But on the same token, the bill's paid. So a lot of times people may choose to have an automatic, debited to their credit card for paying their regular going bill. So to me, if we're going to keep up to modern world, yes, I would say go to credit card.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay, having done online banking and choose not to now, you can go pay your bills, your physical bill at the bank and put it on your credit card if you want the points. So there is an option for people who want to put these larger amounts onto their credit card. I don't feel that all the taxpayers should have to pay this extra money.
Mayor Sahara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the convenience factor, but I don't believe the town of Edson should be paying for those charges. And if we do offer a credit card option, as with many different places that I go ahead and make purchases, there's a surcharge that I have to pay that 1.5% in order to do the transaction. So I think that would be a way that if you want that convenience, then you're going to have to pay a little bit for that convenience, but I don't think that should be borne on taxpayers myself. I do like the convenience. I do a lot of banking online and through credit cards, and I think that would be a more acceptable way of handling that sort of situation.
Councillor Sorensen.
Yeah, I just want to echo those. I think we should offer the most amount of flexibility in payment options to our taxpayers and utility payers, but I would also, I know it's, as a business owner, it's easy for me to add that surtax rate into their bill. So we'll charge it right back to them. If you want the convenience, then it's an extra 1.5 or 2% or 3%, whatever the number is.
Just through to the committee. There's actually rulings where you're not actually allowed to put that surcharge onto a credit card payment. It's different with businesses because they can just then raise the price of their goods, which would cover that. As a municipality, we don't have that option. Your taxes are what your taxes are, or your bill is what it is. And you're not actually allowed to add that as a surcharge for using a credit card.
So you couldn't have a convenience fee or something that you could add onto the bill?
With ActiveNet, I know when you pay with ActiveNet, there's a convenience fee. It's because they're a business, they're a third-party option. With us, I remember when I worked in High Prairie, we did that, and the bank contacted us and said, you cease and desist, or we will remove your debit machines. We're not allowed to actually add that on because they're using a credit card. That makes a big difference.
Councillor Byer, Councillor Curry.
I'm not in favor of being able to allow our residents to pay their taxes through credit card. I feel that the rest of the municipality shouldn't have to pay for someone to earn a few more points. However, something I would be open to considering is the payment of smaller amounts, like maybe your dog license, if that would be something that would be an added convenience to allow the residents to actually have their dog's license, so we have better dealings around that for the utility department or public works, then I would be in favor of that, but to like a smaller amount of $100 or $200 or whatever would be necessary, but not for the tax bills or utility bills.
Councillor Curry.
I would just echo what Councillor Byer had said. I would be in favor of a smaller amount, but definitely not at that cost of the interest to the rest of the community to be able to use your credit card. And just a question with that. Did I read this correctly? You will be able to not use a credit card, but you can still do online banking through it. So you can
Yes.
still use Interact to pay your
Yes.
bills,
Yes.
just on credit cards.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And it's a link that will then apparently go through to your online banking and then bring that back into our system, so it's actually easy for us to apply those payments to the bills.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think
Because
that
you'll still be
provides a
able to
lot
use
of-
our portal for that, but it would be for just using your online banking. If you went to pay your taxes, there would only be the one for online banking. If we allowed it for the accounts receivable, like dog licenses, there would then be the option of both. So they would click on whichever one they would choose on that page that they go to.
Councillor Chouinard.
Through to the chair, like I fully understand that, but a lot of times with changing world, people don't have checks anymore. Like, I mean, it's rare that a person other than a business don't have checks. So having the option, I don't believe by adding a credit card payment in, because you may walk in into the town office and you're going to pay the bill and you expect it to be whatever total. So a lot of people choose to put it on their credit card. So if they're gaining points and they're paying their bill on time, that's an advantage to the town as well. So I'm again saying we can try it, monitor it and see what it costs us, but if it's making people pay the bills quicker, maybe that's an advantage to us.
Councillor Byer and Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, so through the administration, I've been using online banking for about 15 years, so I haven't come down to the town to pay my utility bills or my tax bills, but is there an option for them to use debit at the town if they want to pay their tax or utility bills?
Through the chair, yes. At the moment, debit cards are accepted at the counter and I believe down at the leisure centre as well.
I do think I think it is worth the consideration that as these types of platforms progress, online transactions and credit card transactions are increasingly, I think, a way that people do pay. Not that we must, but just to be aware that I think a virtual city hall type program where you can pay your utility bills but you can't use your credit card may not then penetrate in terms of usage as much as we'd like to see. If it's not super easy and super convenient, which is kind of the whole point of the system, we may not achieve as much as we hope to there, or it may impact that dynamic. So it's really a balance, I think, between some of the dynamics the committee is already discussing, but I think something worth considering. But.
Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Curry.
Through the chair, I concur with you. I mean, they can use a debit card. It's not like you can't use anything. So I think that's fine. And when you say who are we serving, well, I think we're serving the taxpayers and not charging everyone for people to use their credit cards. Like, it's putting the tax load on everybody then. There's no option. With a debit card, it's finished, done. People just pay them all.
Councillor Curry and Mayor Sayre.
Just through the chair, what service fees do we still have that you can't use your online banking for? Like I'm the same as Councillor Byer. All mine is done through my online banking. So what are the typical things that people have to come through down
For the
to
through the chair, sorry, for the online banking, they can pay their taxes, their utilities, and any accounts receivable, so their dog license, business license. Excuse me, any accounts receivable. Basically, the bills that you can pay here, you can pay online,
Okay,
if it's invoiced to you.
okay. Thank you.
Mayor Zare?
Yes, through to Ms. Bittner. I'm a little confused that we would not be allowed to pass a surcharge on when I do a lot of transactions and there's always a 1.5%. Is it just because we're a municipality that we're not allowed to?
I'd have to, sorry, through the chair,
Yeah.
I'd have to check into that further. I believe it's because we have that direct cost and we are a municipality, that's the cost and that's what they're paying, and we can't charge them more for that, whereas a business can just put it on the cost. And our price is $19.95 and it includes all of your overheads,
Yeah.
whereas we can't put it on just because they're using their credit card.
But I know that.
That's the issue.
Well, I know the transactions I do, it's actually, if you want to pay by credit card, it's 1.5% more, whatever it is. Check this box if you agree to this additional charge, and it actually on the receipt says whatever convenience fee or whatever. So I'm a little confused at how we would not be allowed to do that. And I agree. I don't think that taxpayers should have to foot the bill for that. I would be willing to try it out for a year, see what those numbers look like. If it is only a couple $100, then big deal. But it's and certainly there's a huge convenience factor there that I think more and more people are looking towards those sorts of options. Having said that, I know that our utility bills are still being mailed out for the majority of our residents who haven't signed up to e-billing. So I don't know if our community is necessarily there yet.
Sorry, if may, so just a few thoughts. One is going back to my time in Picture Butte, my previous community, we moved away from credit cards. The fees for June and July, which is when people were paying their taxes, were more than the rest of the year combined altogether, and so it certainly had a significant impact on the cost there. I think I just also want to make a distinction here, and Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're talking also about the functionality of virtual town hall, and do we think this will impact the functionality of that system and that program? And I think that the general ability to pay with credit cards is maybe a little bit separate from that situation, and so. If we go forward with virtual city hall without credit card payments, it just looks a little bit different than if it has the ability for people to pay credit cards. Not that it won't still have value, it just may look a little bit differently. Does the committee have any feel for whether or not they think that will impact the value of that type of system?
Councillor Wilkinson?
Even at a car dealership, you can't pay for your whole car on your Visa. I've tried. They limit it by one of the points. You know, I mean, it has to be reasonable, and let's try to be reasonable in our policy.
Councillor Chenard?
I would totally agree with admin as well, that if we wanted to put the option and respond to Janet Wilkinson, go to a different dealership. I bought cars on credit cards.
Good, okay. I never have been able to pass 10,000.
Councillor Sorensen?
I agree. A virtual town hall without credit card payments would have much less penetration into the community, much less use. So I would like administration to look into the convenience fee a little further and get a definitive answer for us next time we see it. I think that's the solution, if it's possible.
I think too, if I may add too, is it does cost. We allow people to use their debit cards, and we pay the 85 cents
85 cents
per
a
transaction. We do that so that it's convenient for people to come and pay, and so it's not unusual, right, to do that. And so again, we're just talking about a balance point in tension. How far do we go along the convenience scale before the cost outweighs the benefit of providing that convenience to the community?
Councillor Curry, then Mayor Shahar.
Well, I do agree that without the credit cards, I do think it would limit, so I think that there needs to be some, and whether there's a max on how much you can pay on your credit card. Would you be able to get us numbers, is that available from White Court, on what they pay per
Probably.
year? Just knowing they're fairly similar to us, and I think it would be a good,
They said their annual processing fees have been around $50,000.
at
So
that I
that's-
think I'd be
that's,
comfortable.
if you take that back to the taxation, that's $500,000 increase for your taxation to cover those fees.
Okay.
There's there.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with looking at utility accounts and things such as dog licensing, but I don't think taxes should be put on people's credit cards. Not only they're gonna be paying interest on that for some people, I just, and the costs associated for the town, I don't think that's a reasonable thing. And I think furthermore, most people on their tax accounts, like Councillor Schnarr said, most of them either mortgage or they have some other options, including automatic monthly withdrawal, which helps those individuals out. So.
Yeah, I think my impression is that people are most interested in convenience. Points as a secondary consideration. So I think it would be unlikely for people who are paying it through their mortgage or who are already on the monthly installment payments to stop a program like that and go towards a different program just so they can get some air miles or something like that. I think convenience will most often trump that dynamic.
Any other questions?
So I think messages just do a little bit more research on the convenience fee there. I did hear that it seems to be, if we were to go forward, there's more appetite for utilities and others, and keeping taxation as kind of separate from that as we consider this moving forward. Would that be fair in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, I think it would be fair. I'd be in the same boat in that, you know, don't want to see the taxation there, but the rest of it, yeah, for sure. I think that's pretty much what the council is saying. Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Protective Services, trespassers at the landfill.
Yes, thank you. Just further to the information that's been provided there, this is an ongoing concern that is not new. It's been going on in our community, but I felt it would be valuable just to bring it to council's attention for consideration. So there's a couple of points here of concern. Specifically directly related to the town is anytime someone's on our property, we have liability. So the more people we have in our landfill site, someone gets hurt or something like that, there's liability associated with that. That is, I would say, the most direct concern for the town. Then we have some residents and business owners in the area that are impacted by this dynamic with people moving through their properties and leaving junk, right? So there's just a mess associated with that. Unfortunately, the people often associated with this behavior aren't the most savory characters, and so there's the security of their properties and their businesses that are concerned, petty theft and vandalism and those types of things that come along with those types of things. So this is an issue that administration has met with a number of individuals there. Recently, the mayor and I met with a few concerned residents. I've met with Sergeant King on this a number of times as well, and so they're quite aware of that. So we wanted to put this in front of the committee for any comments, feedback. One of the challenges is I just really don't believe there's any really simple answers to this. The very simple answers, something like full-time security is costly. You know, we would anticipate something like $150,000 a year to have like on-site security, basically after hours all the time, and that would most likely eliminate much of the problem. It's just is that a cost that is reasonable or that council would want to incur. There's some other things that can be done. A patrolling plan for the RCMP could be put in place where we just, have an expectation of a certain amount of visits, shall we say, out to the landfill. The downside to that is an RCMP car going out there every once in a while. It's pretty easy for people to just duck in the bushes. I'm not sure how much that will actually deter people. They specifically go when they think they're going to avoid people, and they get pretty good at those types of things. We can obviously, by law enforcement, although they're only on shift until 8 in the evening, we can encourage some more visibility there. And also, anytime a RCMP officer is there, they're not somewhere else, and I think it would be probably most prudent to ask more specific questions of Sergeant King in terms of the resourcing and that type of thing. But those are definitely options. One other piece that has been asked or considered is more substantial fencing around the facility. I just think honestly that would be a waste of money. These people aren't accessing by vehicles, they're walking, and they'll just cut the fence and go through. I just really don't think it will do much in terms of value of money spent or expenditure on fencing it. We certainly, doesn't mean we can't consider those types of measures. I just think in order for them to be effective, again, the cost might be substantial. So then for the committee's consideration.
Councillor Schnard.
Okay, thanks for bringing this forward. I have to totally agree, it's not something new. And I guess for the liability of the town, I believe the signage and stuff, like we have no salvaging, trespassing, and I agree, how much money do you spend on a fence? So unless it becomes a huge problem, it'd be no different landfill, dumpster, diving, it's the same scenario. So we can monitor it, but I don't agree we should spend a lot of money on it unless it's a huge problem that they're causing fires or anything, because if at all, I believe we have security cameras. I would agree we'd put maybe some cameras up by the town's valuable property, meaning the scale house and buildings, if they're being vandalized. But as far as the landfill, what exactly are they taking? Nothing of great value, so I wouldn't spend any money there, but maybe at the building if it's a problem.
Yeah, if I may add one other thing I just mentioned, we have one of the things that we've changed is with purchasing of our own piece of equipment out there. I believe 2.5 years ago now, we've been able to do a lot more covering, which discourages, right? Because if things are buried, it's a lot harder to take them away. I think that has been maybe had some positive impact. My point simply being is that administratively we're certainly interested in impacting this dynamic. It's just honestly it's a really challenging question.
Councillor Beyer, Councillor Curry, and Councillor Sorensen.
Through the chair to administration. So what kind of, I have a couple questions. What kind of things are they scavenging? Is it a lot of the same particular items located in the same spot, or is it just randomly all over the place?
Thank you. I think there's a few types that are most interested in. If ever, the wire or thing that have monetary value, copper wire and those types of things, those don't usually end up in our landfill because they have value, although they are there. But those are the types of things that they're looking for. One of the other items that they're often looking for is something that they can help to build a structure, a lean-to, if you will. And that's one of the downsides for the neighboring properties is they will grab some wood or something and start dragging it away and either get distracted or bored and then leave those things lying around, and or successfully build a shanty or a little shack out in the woods and then reside in them, that type of thing. So I would suggest those are probably the two most common, although you could probably hear from the residents that there's been anything and everything has been drug out of there and moved around, and so it's hard to say, I think, for certain.
Councillor Curry.
I just have two questions through the chair. Is there times of year, like is this a bigger problem during the summer versus the winter? And then do we have any ideas of what other communities are doing to help lessen this?
Yeah, thank you. So I do think it's more active in the the non-winter months there for a couple of reasons. It's just easier, it's more accessible. In terms of transporting things, that's a lot easier. In terms of other communities, this is a common problem. What we find is that one of the challenges with our landfill is it's actually located too close to town, and that causes some issues with many communities. It's a kilometer or two outside of town, which is just a whole nother ball game in terms of walking out there and carrying stuff back and forth. And so some places have a similar problem, although ours is a little bit unique in terms of it being located, I think, in such close proximity to our community. But it's not an uncommon issue.
Three short questions, if you allow me.
Two.
What is the quality of fence around the land. Is there a perimeter trail or a road that someone can drive around the property and do like a perimeter check? And 3, are these people going down the landfill road to get there, or is another road that they're going to get out? Because maybe you just need to drive down the landfill road once in a while, see if anybody's carrying a roll of copper wire on the back.
Yeah, thank you. There's, I think, a couple different answers to this question. So the fencing is only maybe 60 feet on either side of the entrance. Its main goal is to keep vehicular traffic around. And then there's a lot of brush that kind of goes around the perimeter in terms of accessibility there. There's not a specific path that a vehicle could drive either internally or externally to do a perimeter check. Unfortunately, the land there's pretty rough for the most part, but someone going into the landfill, and the RCMP do have a key so they can access it, can do a pretty general check of the area. But one of the challenges is people can scamper off into the bush pretty easy and be hard to see and or hard to track down. In terms of where they're coming from, yes, some of them just walk right up Landfill Road. There's a few other right-of-ways and kind of paths that I would say are frequented. There are some of them created by this traffic and others kind of natural or otherwise. But I think any of them would be challenging to block, right? Or they'll just, because when you're going on foot, you just go around, right? Like you can put cement blocks on there, it doesn't matter, you just walk around, or it's difficult to stop the foot traffic.
Mayor Sahara, then Councilor Breyer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As CEO Derrickon mentioned, himself and I met with some residents about this a few weeks ago, and this is a huge concern for them. They're very upset, to put it mildly, about this ongoing issue. It may not be a big deal for the community as a whole, but it's certainly a huge issue for them. Some of these people, if they come across them, they do have interactions, and it can get a little scary and possibly violent at times. And I think that one of the challenges that we have there as well with RCMP patrols is we have the CN rail crossing, and there's always the risk of resources getting tied up behind a train, which is another issue that we're trying to deal with. But I think when we're talking about fencing, just there this weekend, they just cut through the bolts. They just cut through the fence. I think some visibility there would be probably our first step. Asking our RCMP to do additional patrols, to provide some reports back to council of how often they are patrolling, if they're able to find anybody. Maybe doing some actual patrols within the actual landfill site as well, going through the gates and not just doing the perimeter. It's really hard to see inside of there at night as well. I don't know if lighting might be an option, or that might just create more problems, allowing people to see more and get more. But it's certainly a huge concern for the residents. I think that we need to have do some serious considerations on this. I think bylaw enforcement, doing some bylaw in there as well would be helpful. I'm not convinced that additional fencing is going to help this situation, unless you want to electrify it. But I really do think that we do need some additional presence down there to hopefully discourage that behavior. And if they see the RCMP, maybe they'll move on to other areas. But I know it's a huge concern for the residents in that area.
Councilor Breyer.
Through the chair to administration, are there, I don't think any of the solutions are a full solution. If we did go down the hill or down the road of fencing it, is there a way to have it so it's alarmed, that if it was cut, then an alarm goes off, so at least then you would know to send patrol or police out there to make it realize that something's happening right now?
Yeah, thank you. Probably. I just think anytime your alert system becomes more sophisticated, it's more costly, and monitoring a perimeter fence of that size, I don't have any specific numbers in front of me, but I would just suggest we'd be talking about a pretty significant cost for something like motion sensors around the whole perimeter or that type of thing. Certainly not impossible. It would just then be a question of, I think, cost there.
Councillor Chenard.
Okay, so what I'm hearing in the room, like, I totally agree with the residents around the landfill. So it's not the landfill's a problem, but if the individuals are causing problems on private property, that becomes a huge concern. What the individuals do at the landfill doesn't really, they're not hurting anything. But I agree, if they're going on to private properties, residents, et cetera, that's when the police enforcement should be stepped up, because now these individuals are not salvaging, they are trespassing on private property. Trespassing in the landfill, oh well, but if they are, then I would express that our concern is concentrate on the people's residents, whoever these individuals are doing it. If you make it well known, you start showing up and you honestly charge and arrest the people, not for salvaging at the landfill, but for trespassing on private property.
Yeah, thank you. Two things there, I think, that I would say. One is that if we can discourage them going into the landfill, then there's less of them on private property. So I think our part is to try and do our best to secure our site and our facility to make it as unattractive for them to be there, and then they'll be causing less disturbance on the private property. And then in terms of the enforcement on private property, there's some real issues with that. Some of it is response time. If there's a train or something like that, as soon as you call the police and they just dash off into the bushes, it's pretty much a lost cause. And or even if the RCMP2 catch them, at most what they can prove is trespassing usually, and trespassing is honestly, again, Sergeant King would be better to discuss this. It's a waste of the police time. It's a waste of every time, because the consequences are minor, and in some cases none. So there's not really a fear of being caught by the RCMP, even because not a lot happens there. And so one of the things that we have started looking into is, can we adjust our bylaws in a way that would give the RCMP the ability to apply some enforcement mechanisms that would make that less appealing? Unfortunately, that usually means monetary, but these individuals are not the type that would pay a fine if they got one, generally speaking, and so that has minimal effect. But we have looked into those types of elements as well. And also, to be very fair to Sergeant King, I would just say they are constantly making decisions about where to deploy their resources, and this is no disrespect to those property owners. I've had this conversation with them many times. Is our police are just sometimes deciding between a trespassing call and or other, which they would determine and have to determine on a regular basis more higher priority issues that they're dealing with at any given time. And that's why, again, I repeat this, is there's not a simple answer to this question, because we pay the RCMP sending them there more is I think helps, but it does cost us money, and it does take away from their other things. So it is at least at minimum one of the areas I think we should start on. I share the mayor's view, having a regular patrol schedule expectation of the RCMP, and then some reporting back in terms of when that's happening, and also observing whether or not it's having any impact on the dynamic would be probably the best place to start in terms of resource allocation. But.
Councillor Wilson and Councillor Byer.
Okay, I take offense at everybody being called unsavory that's out there. I personally see them as environmentalists and recyclers, and I think let's see what we can do to help these people. Number one, I believe in Hinton, our neighboring community. They have a shed at the edge there where they put some usable things in it, like lumber, toys, copper wire. Why don't we work on what we can do rather than just pointing a finger at people for doing things that they may need to do?
Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to administration, I have to, at some point agree with what Councillor Wilkinson said. I know when I was working for my previous company, and I would go to the recycle depot early in the morning and drop off my stuff, and often there would be other people there looking for just reusable items, I would say. If there's some way that we can help assist that, so we're not, necessarily endangering people, but it doesn't really solve the trespassing question on the neighboring properties. Is there any evidence that a security personnel has actually decreased the amount of trespassers going without additional fencing or cameras or additional infrastructure to support that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any specific data in front of me, just that manned security sites are much more, that's we, in our land use bylaw, we allow security seats on site because if there's someone there on site, people are much more likely to go and create mischief or trespass or that. So generally speaking, yes, having a manned site means it's more likely that people will trespass or be there when they're not supposed to be there. But I don't have any specific numbers in terms of how effective that might be. Yeah.
Councillor Curry and Councillor Sorensen.
I would just, add that I would agree with Councillor Wilkinson is I would like to see more about what approach can we do that we're not going to stop people from going in. So how could we make it that it's more accessible, putting the things that are available and knowing that it is often, you're not salvaging if you're not needing it for the most part, right? And it is a resource for them, but doing it in a way, because I do agree, it really does sound like other than security, how do we, nothing else seems to be stopping, so how can we make it a more, and looking into what other communities are doing in that sense, to putting and what goes in those sheds and such.
Councillor Sorensen and Mayor Zaire.
I'm not convinced we need to focus RCMP efforts in this area. I think RCMP have better things to deal with. I would be in favor of lights, possibly a perimeter road, and maybe, I don't know if there's private security that can do a patrol, obviously during summer months, and maybe just randomly patrol. Be a much better use of our dollars than paying RCMP to do it. Those are my thoughts.
Mayor Zaire.
Yes, through the chair, I don't disagree with what Councillor Wilkinson said, but we're trying to reduce the amount of people going to landfill and trespassing on people's property there. So my concern would be that we would be encouraging people to go there. So I would suggest that if we were to do something like that with valuable materials, it not be located at the landfill. Because I think I would hazard a guess that the residents along that road would be not impressed with increased traffic by these individuals. I know that a lot of these folks need some extra help, and they're just trying to survive. So I would be interested to know if we could maybe do some random security out there at a less cost, that maybe they'd be able to divert some of those people away from and discouraging that type of behavior. I don't know what there is no easy solution to this. I'm a little concerned that when we're talking about lighting, there's going to be huge costs associated. And same thing with perimeter roads and that sort of thing. But I think some visibility there with some patrols, I think would certainly help. And maybe we try to direct those individuals, if they are caught, to get the resources and the help that they need if they so desire.
Councillor Wilkinson.
We've discussed this before with the Recycling Society, like Habitat for Humanity has got, what's it called, Rebuild or something like that? Restore. To maybe see if we can work with the recycling center to have something like that, and at least we have things available at a lesser cost.
Well, I know with the recycling, they said, Anna gave us a presentation that she would like to have something like that.
Right.
And it would be free.
Yes.
She wouldn't charge for it at all.
Yeah.
Instead of going to the landfill, it would come to them. And anybody could pick it up or whatever.
Right.
Councillor Sorensen.
Can I just comment on that? They've applied for a grant for a new building at the recycling depot to house construction, reusable construction materials. Unfortunately, it looks like it won't be done for this construction season, but we're hoping for next season it'll be ready. And so that'd be windows, 2x4s, plywood.
Yeah.
So maybe that will relieve some of this.
Councillor Curry.
And just no idea of cost, so maybe this is totally unrealistic, but just knowing with spring cleanup happening this week, I've just seen a ton of people on Facebook have been saying, my stuff is here now, take it. If there was a way that when the pickup is happening, that the stuff that is salvageable isn't just thrown in, but is actually kind of put in a different pile, and then that pile could, before going out to the landfill, be kind of taken somewhere where people can just come walk, instead of, most people aren't going to go to back alley, and you don't really want to encourage them going to individual people's back alleys and taking things. So if there was a way to add that into our spring cleanup, to just not having those things, because often that stuff, just on my walks, I've seen a lot of those piles, and a lot of that stuff is the type of things that people would be, because it's, for a lot of people, it's not garbage, it's just, we're done with it.
Councillor Schnarr?
We're going way off course and round in circles. I think
Yes.
we should end the discussion, no longer about trespassing.
I guess I just got one question. Probably Councillor Schnarr, I remember way back when, still had the landfill there, that you could go up to the shack, and if you wanted something out of the landfill, there was somebody to go with you, and you could pick it up, come back out, and they would weigh it for you. And that. Is that an option too, of maybe with our personnel out there, you know, they supervise them, they get what they need, sort of go, and then they're on their way, and that would, maybe that reduce it? I know the landowners out there, it's not gonna stop them from breaking in and that. I mean, I got the sewer line running behind my place, and I got people wandering back there all the time with stuff coming from the landfill. Had 2 camps back there, which the town had to clean up, was on CM property with the CM police, and a lot of that came from the landfill, a lot of it, so.
Yeah, thank you. That is something, there is some permitted salvaging, I'll say, that does take place there in those contexts, and so it is certainly one of the things that we are considering in terms of how do we make that as accessible and as appropriate as possible. The truth is we, in terms of an operational consideration, we want the least amount of salvaging possible for liability reasons, those type of things. But we can do things like try to separate things that are actually useful and setting them aside and creating those dynamics. But I think there are still some issues with that. The reality is that I don't think many of the people that we're talking about here are the ones that would access that type of program, even if it existed. But yeah.
One more, Councillor Schnarr?
No, I was just gonna say the question was answered. It's a liability. Every landfill gets away from it because of the liability.
Okay. So you want some more information on this? You want to do some more?
No, I think I've got enough information here. I'll do, administration will do some more work on it, and we'll keep council informed there.
Okay, great. Okay, moving on, sundry item here. Public participation policy, L-5, L-D-5.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is new to council, obviously. We Steve has been working on this. It's something that is mandated under the new Municipal Government Act, that each municipality have a public participation policy. It's intended to be a high-level guide in terms of engaging with the public here, and I think Steve has a few comments he'd like to share with you, and then obviously looking forward to some feedback.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep it fairly brief here, and we're getting close to lunchtime. So this is something I've been working on. Just to give a brief overview, the public participation policy essentially guides council and administration on how and when to engage the public, gives us as well as the public a better understanding of the process. The principles of the policy explain why we're creating this policy and how it's going to benefit you as decision makers as well as the public, and having them more involved in certain situations. It also outlines the role of both council and administration in the public participation process. Obviously, the implementation is important, but one of the keys is making sure we close the loop. So make sure we report our findings back to the public once we've presented them to council. Policy lays out the general guidelines as to when we would be seeking public participation and engagement. Well, we can't go to the public for every item. This gives us a bit more clear guidance on what should trigger it, as well as leaves it open to direction from council. So some examples here are changes in the process, service level, reviewing existing programs and services, large-scale projects with big budget implications, as well as the budget process itself, strategic priorities, and anything that we get direction from council. Any public engagement process will follow the MGA, FOIP, and other policies. commit to transparency, authentic intent, informed participation, accessible participation, and delivering feedback back to the participants. And finally, this is just a little public engagement spectrum that shows some of the levels of public engagement by increasing involvement and influence. There is another level which is informed, but that's more of a communication level rather than an engagement piece. So just some examples, consultation, that's when we're thinking of changing a process, perhaps do a poll on it, ask whether we should or not, or certain pieces of that. To deliberate, we're looking at changing the process. What do you think? What kind of changes should we make? What are your ideas and solutions? It's more involved, giving them some more feedback into it. Collaboration can be citizen-led. It's working together through workshops or other means towards a common goal. An example of that would be the downtown revitalization workshops that we did. And finally, empower, which is completely citizen-led by means of a plebiscite or giving them the power to make a decision on behalf of the town. So that's just a brief overview. If you have any questions.
Any questions? So this is gonna be an ongoing, we won't deal with this at the next council meeting, you'll,
I mean, that's at the discretion of the committee there. I recognize that it was just introduced here. It can be brought forward to council, and at that time, if council feels it needs more work at the committee level, they can send it back, or they can just specifically request that it goes directly to the next committee if they'd like some more time to consider and think about it. The next council meeting won't be until mid-June. Yeah, so it'll be the 19th, I believe. And this, we have until July 22nd, Steve, is that the date? So it just needs to be, we need to have something in place prior to July 22nd, so that's just the timeline we're looking at.
Councillor Sorensen, Councillor Schnard, and Councillor Wilkinson.
I'd like to see those triggers fleshed out for when things get kicked off. I'm just a little uncomfortable leaving it the way it is, but that's just me.
There's a lot of this information in here. Some of it's duplicated, like you're saying, for large projects. If we borrow more than $5 million, you know, the public can stop us. And then, I believe we need this for information. It's not unimportant, but it's not crucial we have it now. This would be a great item to bring to our annual retreat to discuss. So, I mean, some of this is important, some's already duplicated, so I don't see the urgency. Bring it to our retreat, let's discuss
The
it.
MJ said, he just said it.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Okay, I know transparent is C word, you know, just like silos was a while ago, and check the box. Could we use a thesaurus and get some other word beside that? I just think, of course you're transparent, like, that's what it is, some different wording.
Councillor Curry, then Mayor Sayre.
I'll be honest with this just coming in this morning.
Yes.
I don't feel comfortable, I won't be comfortable for this at the council table right away, without more time for me to go through it in detail. I think it's a really important policy, and I will probably need, or at that one, to be able to ask questions at the next committee of the whole, just because I would like some more time to go through this and be able to see it. Yeah.
Mayor Sayre.
Yeah, I just like to remind council, new municipal government acting states that we have to have a policy passed by June 23rd, so or not
July 22nd.
or July, in place by July 23rd. It says so in the documentation, so we need to have something passed by then, so we can't wait till our strategic planning session. Having said that, I think this needs to be brought back to
I do too.
committee meeting
I don't like it
here in
passed.
2 weeks and give us a chance to have a look at it and consider it, so.
I agree. Councillor Byer.
Yes, I would like, through the chair, I would like some more time to look at this. Is there any aware that we're gonna find out what type of public participation? Like, is it through surveys, or is that gonna be a part of the policy, or like what that means? Like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, thank you. I think that that's possible, that there could be a listing of types of engagement, and I think that would be, if you look at the levels there, consult, deliberate, collaborate, empower, that we could just specifically say, if we're at the consult stage, this is the types of activities. If we're at the deliberation stage, this is the type of activities, and so on, so that it's a little bit clear there. It also does depend on the stakeholder groups and the issue, and so if it's a very narrow but very impactful piece, then you may engage them a little bit differently rather than just, an online survey is not how you engage that group. You go and meet with them and you talk to them. And so it depends a little bit on the circumstance and the nature of what you're talking about. I think too that this is a policy that I think will evolve over time, and this is just getting the first pieces in place. What we'll start to see is municipal best practices will emerge, and we'll start to be able to see what some of our counterparts are doing. And I think, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as you went out and looked, it seemed like everyone was kind of starting with this. It's very vanilla, like I don't think there's any reason not to say it. It's just intended to be very high level. Part of it is, yes, we're just mandated to have one in place. I agree with Councillor Curry that I think this is an important piece and we want to be considerate of it. My suggestion would be that getting this in place is good. I think following that up with a conversation perhaps at strategic planning session in the fall to evaluate it in greater detail would probably not be a bad idea, and ensure this matches up with what we want our imperative to be in terms of how we engage, when we engage, and also meeting the requirements under the legislation. Right now we are mandated to have this, and so I think those are all pieces of it. Thank you. I hope to be clear, administration was not expecting an answer today. I was just giving those as options, and we're very comfortable to give this some more time. We just wanted to get this on your minds because we know that time frame is not as long as we may like it to be, but bringing it to the next committee meeting I think is quite comfortable for administration, and that should provide council with some opportunities to consider this dynamic. So, Steve, do you have anything to add to that? Or
no, I would just caution about getting into too much detail in a policy, and then it sort of ties our hands. It's good to have some general guidelines like this without getting into too many minute details.
Okay, I do like this. I think it's important the same way in that. Got to have a budget July 23rd, which gives us time to do it. And also, if we bring it back to our retreat, we can always look at it again, and any other discussions, we can make a change after that. The policies, we can make change to our policies. So if there's something in there that gives us a year that, not working, we can make a change and move on from there. So it is a good start. And I'm very interested in seeing what our other counterparts are doing too. And that'd be kind of nice to see what they're up to, and that's compared to what we're going to do in that too. So, Councillor Sorensen?
I'm just wondering, was the intent for this infographic to be actually part of the policy, or cause I could see value of having 4 or 5 levels right in the policy saying we're going to go level 2 with this issue, or we're going to go level 5 with it.
I also think that. Thank you. Yes, I think that's something that I've heard, and I'm sure Steve is incorporating that as to when those different things are in there. I think it's some of there, but could maybe be a little more explicit. I think also the other part of this is administration then can go forward if we have some clarity and know where and when we consult in what ways, and the policy document then is what guides that, rather than every single time an issue comes up and come back and, well, how are we consulting today? I think we can just create a framework that guides some of those processes a lot more smoothly and more efficiently.
Okay, no other questions then? Okay, moving on. Questions from media and public regarding items of this committee of the whole meeting.
I'm good, thank you.
No thanks. No thanks? Great. No in camera. John Adjournment, please. Councillor Chenard?
I did it
All in
right.
favor?
Actually, not right. The new way.